The Thin Gray Line collection brought to you exclusively by LEOChallengeCoins.com. Collect pins, challenge coins, medallions, emblems, patches, and more at LEOChallengeCoins.com. Visit www.LEOChallengeCoins.com.
There's a certain group of people in the United States that are trying to demonize our border agents and our border detention staff and make them out to be animals. And this is just not the case. Hi, I'm Gary York, True Prison Stories. Please subscribe if you like this video. In just a moment, I would like you to listen to retired Customs and Borders Protection Director, Mr. Louis Gregory, who is also the sponsor at the beginning of my video here. And I would like you to hear what he has to say on his Newsmax TV interview today about some of the things that are being said about border agents and border detention staff and how they're simply not true. And some people are trying to demonize these people who put on their uniform proudly, just like any police officer, any sheriff's deputy, any corrections officer, and try to protect our country and our community. So, without any further ado, I would like you to watch this newscast and this interview with retired Customs and Border Protection Director, Mr. Louis Gregory, and tell us your thoughts after you see the interview on what you think about people attacking our men and women in uniform on the border. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.
Newly elected president of El Salvador says it's his fault why so many people flee his country for the United States. Nayib Bukele told BBC that people flee El Salvador because they can't get jobs. They're being threatened by gangs like MS-13, and that's what he's focused on fixing. Now, here's how migrants leaving El Salvador affect that country's economy. About 20% of the country's population currently lives in the United States. Those people send back more than $4.5 billion yearly to their families. That's about 20% of El Salvador's entire GDP. And that's where I want to welcome in my first guest, retired ICE director. He was director of communications, not ICE rather, CBP. He was director of communications for CBP, Customs and Border Protection. Louis Gregory, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Staggering numbers, but not news to you.
No, you know what? What's news to me is that the majority of the folks in America aren't aware of the tens of thousands of people pouring over the border and what it takes to stop it.
All right, let's talk about that. So you were a director at CBP. You handled all comms. You were the guy who had to field the left-wing media coming in, beating up your agents who were doing their jobs well. How bad? Now, listen, I've gotten to know you. We've spoken. You're not a partisan. You're not a hard right guy. You're not a hard left guy. You're a law enforcement guy for 2 decades. How bad is the crisis at the southern border?
Well, you know what? It was bad. Now it's terrible. It's terrible because what's happening is these men and women of Customs and Border Protection who are supposed to be tasked with protecting the nation and preventing threats from coming into the United States are now being threatened themselves.
They most certainly are. Twofold. They're being threatened by the people coming across the border illegally. We see situations where CBP officers, Border Patrol agents are being pelted with rocks. We saw Border Patrol agent Brian Terry killed under the Obama administration with a gun trafficked south of the border in Operation Fast and Furious. Very dangerous job. No news to you. But then we've got far-left politicians here in the States demonizing these agents, implying they're SS concentration camp guards. This is going to lead to more agents being injured and killed, in my opinion. I don't know what you think, but that's what I feel.
It surely influences the public perception of law enforcement. And yourself, as a prior law enforcement officer, being a police officer and protecting the public is a source of pride. And you have a family, a husband or a wife and children, and you're proud of putting on that uniform and being behind the badge.
Yeah, I agree.
And for the first time, what I see is people have to conceal their occupation because they're afraid for the safety of themselves and their family now.
But isn't that horrible? People go into law enforcement, they go into fire rescue, they go into the emergency medical services. These are noble professions. They're out there every day. When the hurricane hits, let's forget bullets flying. When the hurricane comes, the tornado, the earthquake, when everybody else is fleeing, they can't. They've got to stick around and help. Now you add the additional level of danger with the law enforcement side of it, being shot at, being hit with rocks, being attacked by cartel drug mules and the Salvadoran military dissidents who escort their shipments up. And when they're here at home, it's almost reminiscent of veterans during the Vietnam War. They're shamed into silence about what they do. They're vilified. Sure. They have to be afraid to say who they are if they're out at a restaurant for fear they and their kids are going to be accosted.
Well, you know, you take an oath and you're aware of the threats that you may be confronted with. You know what your obligation is, but you certainly never considered at that time that some of those threats may be coming from the very people that are tasked with ensuring you have the ability to do your job.
Now let me ask you this. Put your hat back on when you were comms director over at CBP. You've got Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You've got a chorus of Democrats vilifying CBP officers, the federal agents that work within Department of Homeland Security in all the divisions, and all the sub-agencies. The same people, though, who are refusing to fund. They want to cut the funding to the shelters, to the detention facilities, but demonize you guys for the treatment there. Right. How would you have responded to that in your comms role?
In my experience, these are generally the same leaders that we would proactively approach all Congress representatives and try to bridge a gap and let them understand what we do and how we can communicate to avoid issues. And these would be the same ones that would tell us, no, we're not interested in meeting with you.
Right, right.
So these are, you know, we couldn't even, they're not bridges being burned. These are opportunities to build bridges and they wouldn't allow them.
That's right. They won't even start construction on the bridge. They can't burn it. All right, let's talk about AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, new congresswoman, freshman congresswoman from New York. Now, she visits the border yesterday. She makes a trip to the southern border, and she claims, and this is just absolutely ridiculous because I think you and I both know what went on here. She claims that CBP agents, officers, told migrants to drink water from toilets. Listen to this.
There's abuse in these facilities. There's abuse. This was them on their best behavior, and they put them in a room with no running water, and these women were being told by CBP officers to drink out of the toilet. They were drinking water out of the toilet, and that was them knowing a congressional visit was coming. This is CBP on their best behavior, telling people to drink out of the toilet.
You spent 20 years at that agency. A lot of the problems we're talking about happened under the Obama administration. Do you believe her? Because I don't.
Not at all. But let me tell you that as a director with Customs and Border Protection, I didn't walk in the door as a director. I started at the lowest rank as a trainee.
Right.
And I came up through every single rank in uniform, and I have worked in those detention situations, and there's very clear standard operating procedures. There's never a time that anybody would be told to drink from a toilet.
Let me ask you a question. Could she be mistaking something? Because I've been, right, as a law enforcement guy, in detention facilities. And it's not uncommon for there to be that single unit, which is a toilet unit with a tower, and on top of the tower is the running water sink water fountain. They all have a clean water supply coming in. Can she just be that clueless that she didn't even know what she was looking at?
Well, I don't know that if that scenario is how it played out, but it's quite possible, and I don't know if she's bilingual, but it's quite possible that the personnel were speaking to the migrants in Spanish and telling them that they can get water in the bathroom, and she heard Baño.
That's a good point.
And maybe she doesn't speak the language.
That's a really, really good point. I mean, but this is a woman who went down there, and I know you speak to guys, men and women you used to work with. Her histrionics, her theatrics at the border have to make her a laughingstock in the agency today, don't they?
Well, you know, I think what people forget is that the personnel that work for Customs and Border Protection, we're moms and dads ourselves.
Of course.
Right? So when
we're not going to abuse children.
Never.
Of course.
Never. And it hurts us to see the individuals bringing the children across the border, putting kids in that position.
That's right.
And especially when they're unaccompanied minors. And that's why we, as an agency, had put in place fail-safes and policies to protect those children, to ensure that they're fed frequently. Not only is there a schedule and a log of tracking all of this, but they're told, hey, you know, for instance, if it's time to eat in 4 hours, if you get hungry before that, just tell us.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, because I can't tell you how many times we had to take a child out of a home that was dangerous or filthy, or the parents abandoned the kids, they were drug addicts. You know this. You worked in field
You
operations.
reached in your pocket and you fed them.
You take them to McDonald's.
Exactly.
You take them to a diner. You do everything you can do.
Sure.
And your supervisors work with you. They take you off the clock because you don't want to hand that child over to child services. It puts tears in your eyes.
Listen,
you do all you can do to make them comfortable for those few hours.
We had personnel who in their office would have crayons,
Yeah.
toys,
Yep.
things that they purchased
true.
with their own money. And when there was a situation where there was a child, and it makes me sad to even
It does.
think about
No,
it.
it's emotional. Yeah.
They would take them and sit down with them, and they would feed them.
Yep.
And they would let them draw and play. And it always broke my heart because I would see these kids come in, and the kids don't have a choice. They're put in that position.
That's right.
But I was glad to see the people who I was working with be compassionate and take care of them. So I think what she is saying is disgusting.
It's disgusting, and it does a great injustice to the men and women who put themselves
a
out
lie.
there on the front lines every day. Louis Gregory, former Director of Communications, Customs and Border Protection. Great to have you. Would love to have you back.
Thank you for having me. It was
Got
great
it.
to see you.
Thank you very much.